let's return now to the Southeast, where more than one elector may have been swayed due to less than honest means. The investigation into the misdeeds in Florida, Louisiana, and South Carolina was carried out by so-called returning boards, groups of officials who were given the explicit task by the federal government of investigating the elections in those three states and determining to what extent fraud or corruption may have influenced the voter pool. And their findings were pretty damning. In each case, the returning board found cause to throw out loads, and I mean loads, of supposedly illegitimate votes for Samuel Tilden. So many in each state, in fact, that each state was ultimately awarded to Rutherford B. Hayes, with him receiving each of the state's electors. Now, that may sound perfectly legitimate, right? These are states known for political violence and manipulation, and loads of votes end up being illegitimate. But this causes a controversy in and of itself because those returning boards were made up largely of and appointed by Republican officials in Washington, leading to Democratic claims that this was itself a form of corruption and that the results of the election were illegitimate. Oh dear, what do we do? I'm not going to waste more of your time by explaining what happens next. All you need to know is eventually this thing ends up in the hands of a gargantuan, ridiculous-looking committee made up of both representatives and senators, as well as Supreme Court justices, split perfectly down the middle in terms of party affiliation and chaired by a single, independent, nonpartisan Supreme Court judge, who then recuses himself from the committee and says, I want nothing to do with this, decide amongst yourselves, throwing the entire process into chaos, as the results of the election are still in flux. Ultimately, folks, the findings of the committee are that the election should be decided as it was when all of those electors went to Congress. That those three southeastern states who had so many votes thrown out for voter manipulation or coercion would go to Hayes, and ultimately he would win the Electoral College by a single vote. But the partisan controversy and endless accusations of voter fraud or manipulation cast a pall of illegitimacy over the Hayes presidency, as does one more thing. Hayes lost the popular vote decisively. Samuel Tilden got more votes than Rutherford B. Hayes by a fairly reasonable margin, one that cannot be explained, according to contemporary experts, by voter fraud or manipulation. He just, running on an anti-corruption kind of pro-working class platform, was more popular in 1876. But due to the significance, the decisive significance of the Electoral College, it was Hayes that was ultimately installed as a president who never was able to exercise much legitimacy or popularity in the long term throughout his tenure. Quite a shame, as the man, by all accounts, was a rather unusually kind, generous, and deeply invested civil servant by the standards of the time. But the election of 1876 lays bare for us two really illustrative facts. One, what a deeply, deeply corrupt American election would actually look like. There have not been many, and in modern American history, virtually none at the federal level, sincerely. And secondly, the decisive impact the Electoral College can have on and over the voices of the people in American federal or presidential politics.